In the depths of every soul lies a shadow, and though we spend much of our lives trying to understand ourselves, we often forget how deeply we are shaped, affected, and wounded by those around us. The psyche is not an isolated island. It is a vulnerable landscape, sensitive to intrusion, to influence, to infection. And as much as we must wrestle with our own darkness, we must be equally vigilant of those whose presence brings not light, but distortion. Not healing, but corrosion. There are people who do not merely suffer from their unconscious, they project it into the lives of others. They are unaware of their own inner fragmentation, and yet they walk among us as if whole. And in their unconsciousness they harm, not because they are evil in the cartoonish sense, but because they refuse to confront the contents of their own inner world. And in that refusal, they make you carry what they cannot face. The danger lies not in what is visible, but in what is hidden. The most dangerous people are not loud nor openly hostile. They are the ones whose pain disguises itself as virtue, whose malice hides behind charm, whose manipulation wears the mask of care. They are shadows with a smile, chaos with a calendar. They don't just enter your life, they shape it, distort it, drain it, while convincing you they're doing you a favor. And if you are unaware of their nature, you will mistake your suffering as your own failure, not realizing it was borrowed from someone else's brokenness. You must learn to recognize them, not to judge them, but to protect your psyche. For the psyche, like the body, can be infected by toxic energies, invisible wounds, subtle emotional poison. There is no nobility in letting yourself be destroyed by someone who refuses to heal, and there is no shame in walking away from those who will not confront their own inner demons. Avoiding dangerous people is not cowardice. It is psychological hygiene. It is self-respect. It is the courageous act of drawing boundaries where others would allow erosion. You are not only responsible for your own soul, but for the souls of those who depend on your strength. To preserve your clarity, to protect your depth, you must know when to step back, not in fear, but in wisdom. There is a particular type of person whose danger is not rooted in overt aggression, but in psychological blindness. They do not consciously seek to harm, yet their presence corrodes the psyche of those around them. These are the unconscious projectors, people who have never confronted their own shadow, who refuse to face the darker aspects of their personality, and who unconsciously cast their internal chaos onto others. They live in denial of their envy, their resentment, their fear, and instead of integrating these elements, they blame, accuse, and distort the people closest to them. You will find yourself confused in their presence, not because they are mysterious, but because they are fundamentally dishonest with themselves and therefore with you. Carl Jung taught that we all carry a shadow, the sum total of the aspects of ourselves we repress, deny, or hide. For the conscious individual, the shadow is slowly integrated over time through suffering, reflection, and the search for self-awareness. But for the unconscious projector, the shadow is never confronted. Instead, it leaks outward. They see betrayal where there is loyalty, manipulation where there is honesty, rejection where there is simple boundary. They take the parts of themselves they hate and attribute them to you. And because they are so convinced of their righteousness, you may begin to question your own motives, your own memories, your own reality. This is psychological possession. You become the scapegoat for their unresolved inner battle. Their rage becomes your responsibility. Their shame becomes your burden. They cannot handle the discomfort of self-examination, so they twist the world to fit their narrative. And you, if close to them, become a character in their fantasy. It is a slow erosion of the soul. A conversation with them is not a dialogue but a projection screen. No matter how clearly you speak, they hear only the voice of their wounded self. You are no longer a person. You are a mirror they have painted over, reflecting only what they wish to avoid. And the damage is not always loud. It happens subtly. You start to feel wrong for having needs. You start to doubt your intentions. you feel guilty for speaking truth. In time, your emotional energy drains not from conflict, but from constant misrecognition. It is exhausting to be seen not as you are, but as someone else's hallucination. This is why such people are dangerous, not because they mean to harm, but because their refusal to confront their inner world makes them a threat to yours. To stay close to such individuals is to slowly lose yourself. You will find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, accepting roles you never agreed to, and living in a psychological fog. Clarity only returns when distance is restored. The unconscious projector cannot be healed by your empathy. They must decide to awaken on their own. Until then, your duty is not to save them, but to protect the fragile flame of your own sanity. Because if you allow them to project long enough, you may begin to believe the illusion they cast. The subtle manipulator is among the most insidious forms of dangerous people, because they do not come to you with open threats or visible malice. They come cloaked in kindness, in concern, in attentiveness so precise it borders on devotion. But underneath this carefully cultivated persona lies an unconscious need for control, a deep-rooted fear of losing influence over others. Unlike the overt tyrant, the manipulator does not force obedience, they engineer it. They do not push, they pull with invisible strings, and if you are not awake, you will confuse their control for care, their suffocation for support. This person studies you not to understand, but to exploit. They learn your wounds, your longings, your patterns of guilt, and then they use them as levers to gain emotional leverage. Their weapons are not fists or orders, but carefully chosen words, moments of silence, manufactured guilt, and strategic withdrawal. They punish you not by shouting, but by withholding warmth. And because the manipulation is subtle, you find yourself questioning whether it's even happening. You wonder if you're being paranoid. You start making excuses for them, telling yourself they're just trying to help, that they mean well, even as you slowly lose access to your own decisions. Carl Jung believed that manipulation often stems from a disconnection from the self, from an inability or refusal to face one's own weaknesses and limitations. The manipulator compensates for this emptiness by controlling others. Their unconscious fears of being abandoned, of being powerless, of being irrelevant, are masked by a constant need to orchestrate the emotional environment. And what makes them so dangerous is not that they are always aware of what they are doing, but that they've trained themselves to believe their control is love. They become experts at making you feel like the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the irrational one. You will walk away from arguments confused, unsure of how you became the villain in a story you didn't write. This confusion is the first sign that you are dealing with manipulation, because clarity and truth bring peace. But manipulation breeds chaos, guilt, and exhaustion. You feel like you're being watched without ever being seen, like you are loved conditionally, so long as you behave, so long as you agree, so long as you shrink just enough for their comfort. And every time you attempt to assert yourself, they twist the narrative to make you the aggressor. You are always too cold, too selfish, too emotional. Never quite right, never quite enough. Eventually, the manipulator doesn't have to say anything at all. You begin to censor yourself. You walk on eggshells. You anticipate their reactions before speaking. You change your choices to avoid displeasing them. This is the final goal of subtle manipulation, internalized control. You no longer need to be managed, because you have become your own warden. To protect yourself from such danger requires ruthless honesty, not with them, but with yourself. Ask, does this relationship expand me or shrink me? Does their presence nourish my soul or deplete it? The manipulator thrives in ambiguity. Your defense is clarity. Your salvation is remembering that love without freedom is not love. It is captivity with a velvet mask. The chronic victim is a figure of great psychological complexity, cloaked in the fragile innocence of perpetual suffering. At first glance, this person evokes compassion. They appear broken, wounded by life's cruelty, forever at the mercy of circumstances they claim are beyond their control. But beneath this surface lies something far more sinister, a refusal to grow, a rejection of responsibility, and a subtle strategy to enslave the emotional resources of others. They are not merely suffering. They are using their suffering as currency to buy your loyalty, your time, your identity. And if you are not conscious, you will become their caregiver, their therapist, their emotional crutch, forever drained, never repaid. This person is addicted to being wronged. They do not want solutions, only sympathy. When life presents them with a challenge, they interpret it not as an opportunity to evolve, but as evidence of their tragic fate. And though they are always the victim, they paradoxically hold immense power. They control others through guilt. The more they suffer, the more you are expected to sacrifice. Their sorrow becomes your duty, their helplessness your failure. If you ever attempt to assert your own needs, you are accused of cruelty. If you try to escape the dynamic, you are labeled heartless. In the name of kindness, you are slowly erased. Carl Jung would argue that the chronic victim is someone who has disowned their own inner strength. They fear the burden of agency, of autonomy, of becoming a full human being with responsibility for their fate. So they remain in psychological childhood, expecting others to carry what they refuse to lift. Their suffering, whether real or exaggerated, becomes a defense against self-reflection. Why examine the self when the world is always to blame? Why grow when pity offers more control than power ever could? Chronic victim often attracts empathetic, sensitive people, those who are deeply attuned to emotional suffering, and herein lies the trap. You will feel that helping them is a moral obligation, that your worth depends on your ability to heal their wounds. But in truth, they do not want healing. Healing would mean relinquishing the very identity they have built their life around. To be well would mean to become responsible, and they are terrified of that weight. Over time, you begin to feel like you're drowning in someone else's misery. You find yourself stuck in endless cycles of listening, consoling, advising, only to see no change. Your words fall into a void. Your efforts vanish without acknowledgement, and yet they demand more, always more, as if your love can rescue them from a fate they secretly chose. The danger of the chronic victim is not their pain, but their weaponization of it. Pain is a part of life, suffering is sacred. But when pain becomes a tool for manipulation, for dependency, for parasitic attachment, it ceases to be genuine. Your empathy must have limits. Your compassion must include yourself. You are not responsible for someone else's refusal to evolve. True love does not mean carrying another's shadow forever. It means inviting them to face it themselves. And if they refuse, your departure is not betrayal. It is the preservation of your soul. The passive-aggressive manipulator is a master of concealed hostility, a quiet tyrant who wages war not with weapons, but with ambiguity, silence, and subtle sabotage. Unlike overtly aggressive people, they do not confront directly. That would require courage, accountability, and presence. Instead, they operate from the shadows, masking resentment with politeness, coding hostility in smiles, and wrapping control in the disguise of helplessness. Their genius lies in plausible deniability. If you accuse them, they will claim innocence. If you react, you will look unstable. And this is how they win, by making you doubt your own perception while they slowly unravel your peace. These people are not dangerous because they scream. They are dangerous because they don't. They never say what they mean. They never admit their feelings. They never express their needs. Instead, they create an atmosphere of tension, confusion, and guilt. They forget things you ask them to do. They delay, avoid, withdraw, and withhold. They agree to your face, then sabotage behind your back. And when you confront them, they look at you with wide eyes and say, "I was only trying to help." Their power is in the gap between what they say and what they do. And if you are not grounded in your truth, you will become the villain in their carefully crafted drama. Carl Jung would say that the passive-aggressive person is deeply split internally, caught in a psychic conflict between desire and fear. They want to express their anger, but they are terrified of conflict. They want control, but fear being exposed. So instead of integrating their shadow, they disown it and act it out indirectly. They become haunted by what they cannot admit. They are not at peace with themselves, and so they cannot allow peace in their relationships. Their subtle hostility is a projection of their inner fragmentation. Over time, you begin to feel like you're walking through fog. You sense that something is wrong, but you can't name it. You feel disrespected, but there's no evidence. You feel drained, but can't explain why. This is the goal of the passive-aggressive manipulator: to unseat your confidence, to destabilize your inner compass. Because once you no longer trust your own perception, they can rewrite the story. They can make you the attacker and themselves the victim, and in doing so, they maintain power without ever appearing powerful. You must learn to read between the lines. You must learn to trust what you feel, even if it contradicts what you're being told. Do not wait for open hostility to validate your instincts. Pay attention to what is not being said. Observe the patterns. Recognize the silence. It is not your job to fix their dishonesty. It is your job to remain honest within yourself. Dealing with a passive-aggressive person requires one thing above all else: clarity. Be clear in your words. Be clear in your boundaries. Be clear in your exit if needed. Their power lies in confusion. Yours, not theirs. Take that away, and they have nothing left but their own unresolved war with the self. Let them fight it alone. You are not the battlefield. The chronic victim is among the most deceptively dangerous people you will encounter, not because they wield power, but because they refuse to take any. They wear their helplessness like armor, their suffering like a crown, and their past wounds as proof of moral superiority. Every conversation, every conflict, every misfortune is filtered through the lens of what they did to me. Their identity is constructed entirely around pain, and anyone who challenges that narrative becomes the enemy. These people do not want healing. They want validation. They want to be seen as innocent forever, regardless of the cost to truth, to growth, or to those around them. What makes the chronic victim dangerous is not their pain itself. Many suffer, and suffering alone does not make a person toxic. What makes them dangerous is their refusal to evolve. They turn their pain into a weapon, using guilt, manipulation, and emotional blackmail to control others. They will say things like, "After everything I've been through," or "You don't know how hard it's been for me." Whenever you set a boundary, express a need, or hold them accountable, any form of strength you display becomes an act of betrayal. Your joy becomes offensive, your independence becomes abandonment, and your refusal to play the caretaker role is labeled as cruelty. Carl Jung understood that those who cling to victimhood are often avoiding their shadow. They externalize blame for everything. They project all evil onto the outside world, and therefore never confront the darkness within. This projection is a defense mechanism, one that protects them from responsibility, but also traps them in perpetual suffering. They are terrified of their own agency because it would mean confronting the possibility that they are not just victims, they are participants, and to admit participation is to admit power. Power terrifies them because it comes with risk, choice, and accountability. At first, you may feel compassion. You may feel the urge to rescue, to support, to heal. But over time, you will realize that your empathy is being used against you. The more you give, the more they demand. The more you try to help, the more helpless they become. It is not a relationship. It is a performance. And the moment you stop clapping, you will be cast as the villain. They need you to play a role, and when you stop playing it, they will accuse you of betrayal, abandonment, even abuse. And yet, the only real betrayal is the one they commit against themselves. Every day they choose powerlessness over transformation. To protect yourself, you must stop negotiating with their pain. You must see through the performance without becoming heartless. You must understand that true compassion is not indulgence. It is honesty. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for a chronic victim is to walk away, not because you don't care, but because you do. And because caring means refusing to enable the lie. You cannot free someone who does not want to be free, and you cannot heal someone who uses their wounds as chains. Let them remain in their story if they must, but do not let it become your own. You have your own story to write. Let it be one of courage, not captivity,